Now that we've looked at the basics of our save game object, let's go ahead and put that information into use. We're going to save out some basic data, the player's health exactly, and load it back up when we restart our project. Right now, if we're to test, we can move our character over to this little portal to look inside, and they're going to lose health. However, when we quit the game and come back in, their health is reset to 100, and we'd rather save it whenever they quit the game. If we look at our custom character in our blueprints folder, we already have some things set up for our game. We handle our damage and we update our UI whenever our damage is taken. We have the ability to open up our basic quit menu. So if I go and hit play and hit the U button, this is our basic quit. And when we push this, we're going to want to head and save out before we quit. So that's wired up. We also have the ability when we begin play to set up our user interface and update it to match our current health. So in the middle of all this, we need to go ahead and create our save game, save it out when we quit out, and load it back up when we start. So let's start by creating our save game. If you are following along and you have your SG_basic from before, let's go ahead and delete that because we're going to put it in a different place. And under classes, we're going to make our new save game. So like before, create a new save game. And we're going to name ours SG_basic again. Let's go ahead and open it up by double clicking on it. We're just going to simply store the player's health. So we're going to create one variable of type float called player health. And we're going to change this over to float. We're going to compile and save. And this is all we really need to do with our save game object. All we're using this for is to hold our player's health when we save and load from storage. Now we need to update that information whenever it's appropriate. If we go into our quit function, that's when we're going to want to save out. So let's find our quit function. In our UMG, we have the basic menu, and this is what's loaded up. And we have our quit button. Let's change this to be quit and save since we're going to quit and save now. Let's go into our graph and look at how it's set up. Our on click for the button quit simply calls quit game. So we're going to need to handle our saving of that data first. Somehow in here, we need to be able to get our player's health and save it out to our save game object. First thing we need to do is create our save game. So let's go ahead and right click and create save game. And we have our create save game object node. We'll hook this up and we're going to want to create the save game object of the class we just created. So SG_basic, our basic save game. Once this runs, we will now have a save game object that will have our variable that we want to update. So in here, if we go inside, we type in set. And we scroll down, we can find we have the variable set player health. We have our player health variable inside of our save game object that we now want to set to our current player's health. We'll hook this up. Now we need our player's health. We can go ahead and just simply get our player character and get the health directly from that. So let's go and do that. We'll cast it to our specific type. You can see here it's our custom character. I'm going to right click and turn this into a pure cast just to make it easier so we don't have to hook it up. We're going to get the health. So you can see here we have the player health that is inside of our player character. And we're going to set that to the player health variable inside of our save game object. Now we need to actually do something with that save game object. Well, we need to save it out to disk. We've created an object that holds our updated variable. Now let's put it on disk. Let's grab this save game object and we're going to save to slot. Since we're not too worried about it using up many resources, since it's just one variable, we're just going to save game to slot. We'll hook this one up. So after we set the variable, we're going to save this save game object to a slot. Now, the slot can be any name you want. It could be save. It could be doodad. I'm just going to go with slot 1. Make it easy. User index isn't really much of an issue. It's used when you're saving out on certain platforms. Just go ahead and leave it at 0 unless you need to change it. And at this point, when it's done, it's going to return back a Boolean saying if it was successful or not. We can use that if we need to maybe validate a save. And then we're going to quit the game right after. So our code right here is pretty simple. We create a new save game object. It's going to be an object in memory that has our basic default values. We grab our character's health from the current character in the world, set the variable inside of our save game object to the current player's health, then tell that save game object to go ahead and save itself out to disk with the name of slot 1. And then once that's done, we're quitting our game. We're going to compile and save. We'll go ahead and play. Now if we move our character over here, let him take some damage. I'm going to push the U key to pull up our special quit and save menu. Click quit and save, and we're done. We've saved it out. Now if we go ahead and hit play again, well, we still have the original value because we haven't actually loaded our data. So let's work on that next. We're going to load it inside of our custom character. So let's go back to our custom character. The begin play is where, well, our character begins play at. We've created our user interface. We add to our viewport, and then we update its health value with the player's current health. So we really want to do it before this part. So I'm going to select these nodes, drag them over just so I have some room, and we're going to do it right here. We're going to load our save game and get our variable, take the variable from the save game and put it into our player here, and then update it. So let's go and do that. So we did save from slot before. Let's load from slot. We have our load game from slot node. Since this is in the beginning, when our project first starts up, we don't need to worry about asynchronous. We need to give it our name. Our name was slot 1. And it's going to give us back a loaded game, assuming it can find it. If it can't find it, this is going to be a null or an invalid object. Now, assuming it can find it, we're going to want to get the player health from it. Well, you'll notice I don't have access to my player health. I did before, but now I don't. The return value from here is just a generic save game. It's not our specific basic save game that we created. So we need to cast to that and then get the value. Cast to SG basic. We'll go ahead and put this in line here, connect it up. And then we'll go to our health now. You can see inside of our SG basic, our basic save game we've loaded up from disk, we have our player health. We're just simply going to set the current player's health. So we'll drag out player health from the left and set to that value that was saved to disk, like so. And then we'll go ahead and hook back up our wire that we had before. Now when it sets the health display on our user interface, it's going to grab the current player's health, which we've loaded up from our save game right here. Let's try that out. We'll compile and save and hit play. And if everything worked, you can see we have 40 health now in the bottom left. We can go ahead and go over to our platform, take a bit more damage. We'll walk off of it. We're now at 20. Now, if we quit out, it's not going to save it. Remember, we have to call our save game node to save. So we'll try that again. We'll take a bit of damage. Press the U key to pull up our temporary quit and save menu. Quit and save out. We saved at 20. If we hit play now, we're at 20. So that's working exactly like we had hoped. Now, one issue you may run into is what happens if we try to load and it's not there? Then we're going to get an error. This is where your is valid or your does it exist node comes into play. So let's go ahead and take this code here. Everything after our add to viewport and select it. I'm going to use the arrow key just to move it to the right easily. And let's make sure it's valid first. So let's right click and do does save game exist? We'll hook this up and we'll check for it. This is again really simple. What's the name of the save game? Slot 1. And if it exists on our storage device, it's going to say yes. And if not, it's going to say no. We'll do an if or a branch. And if it does exist, go ahead and load your game. If it doesn't exist, well, we don't want it to do anything. We still need the rest of this stuff running. We still need the display and setting our references inside of our game mode. So let's go and hook that up. We'll just drag down here. Add a reroute node, drag farther along, hook this up to our set health display, double click on our wire to add another reroute node, and while it's not the prettiest, it's back to being functionally proper. So looking at this, we now have it checking to see if our save game exists. If it does, it loads it and updates the player's health. If it doesn't, it goes ahead and skips the part for loading, because we can't load something that isn't there, and sets the player's health to the proper information. And that right there is the basics of saving and loading in a variable. Now, if you want to remove the stored save game, you would use the delete. So let's test that to make sure it's working, so we can actually see the second wire running. We'll also hook up a print to it, so we can see that it's working. We're going to update this. And we've got save game does not exist. So that way, if it doesn't exist, it'll print that out. If we hit play right now, it's not going to print that because it does exist. Let's just temporarily go over to the right. We're going to do I keyboard. You can do any key you want. I'm going to use the I key. We're simply going to delete our save game when we press the I key. So if we do delete game and slot, type in our slot name. Now anytime we press the I key, it's going to delete that game. We'll play. No message. We have 20 health. We'll push the I key. Nothing happens because, well, we've deleted it and we don't have any feedback. But if we close out and now hit play again, now you can see it says save game does not exist on the top left, and we're back to 100 health. Those are your three basic nodes: loading, saving, creating, as well as deleting if you need it. Let's look at something a little more advanced. We're going to look at saving and loading our options menu and its individual quirks.